Another week, another reading update. And this week felt like three completely different reading moods all smashed together. I had a massive Tolkien battle with some serious emotional weight, a very strange and very distracted Stephen King book that I have mixed feelings about, and then I jumped into a fast, fun sci-fi read that reminded me how much I enjoy stories that just move. So yeah, a surprisingly packed week. Let's get into it. This week I read the second quarter of The Return of the King, the third book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this section is basically dominated by one huge battle and everything that comes after it. And what I really like here is that Tolkien doesn't just focus on the spectacle. The battle is massive, it's chaotic, it's intense, and you can really feel the scale. But once it's over, the book doesn't immediately rush on. Instead, Tolkien spends time on the aftermath, the cost of the fighting, the exhaustion, the emotional weight, and the sense that even a victory doesn't mean everything is suddenly fine. And that's something I really appreciate about Lord of the Rings in general. Victories feel earned, but they also feel heavy. People are tired, damaged, and changed by what they've been through. And then, just when things start to settle a bit, Tolkien ends this part on a big cliffhanger. Another cheap cliffhanger, but the kind where you realize that what you've just read is only part of a much larger moment. And there's more consequences coming. The pacing is still very Tolkien, deliberate, and sometimes almost stubbornly calm. But honestly, at this point, I'm fully on board with that rhythm. And I'm still really enjoying taking my time with this one. I also finished The Drawing of the Tree, which is the second book in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. And this one was a bit of a mixed bag for me. I think the biggest thing for me is that I really missed the special feeling of The Gunslinger. That book had such a strong atmosphere, mysterious, lonely, almost hypnotic. And The Drawing of the Tree feels very different. This book is louder, it's faster, and it's stranger in a more chaotic way. And don't get me wrong, it's very weird and very original. You can absolutely feel Stephen King cutting loose here, experimenting with ideas, structures and characters. But you can also feel King getting distracted. There are moments where the pacing really suffers, because he clearly wants to explore an idea, a character, or a situation for longer than the story really needs. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it just doesn't. And for a good chunk of the book, I was enjoying individual scenes, but struggling with the overall flow. That said, the third act completely saved the book for me. That section finally pulls things together. The tension ramps up, and the characters start clicking into place, and suddenly the story feels focused again. It reminded me why people are so passionate about this series. And by the end, I wasn't blown away, but I was convinced enough that I absolutely want to continue. So overall, mixed feelings, some pacing issues, but I'm still very much invested in where the story is going next. And after that, I started Shards of Honour by Louis McMaster Bujold. This is the first book in the Vorkosigan saga. And honestly, this was the surprise of the week. And from the very beginning, this book is just fast-paced. It throws you straight into things, and doesn't mess around. There's action, there's political tension, there's romance, there's world building, but none of it feels overwhelming. Everything is introduced smoothly and it feels very intentional. What I especially liked is just how much fun this book is. The characters are immediately engaging, the dialogue flows really well, and even when serious things are happening, the book never feels heavy or exhausting to read. It's the kind of story where you sit down planning to read a chapter or two and suddenly realize you're way further in than you expected. And comparing this to Tolkien's slow, deliberate pacing and King's very chaotic structure, this felt like a breath of fresh air. Now I'm still early into it, but so far I'm having a genuinely great time. One thing that really stood out to me this week is how much reading mood matters. Tolkien requires patience and focus. You have to meet the book where it is. And Stephen King, at least in The Drawing of a Tree, demands flexibility. You kind of have to roll with the weirdness. And Shards of Honour is just welcoming. It wants you to keep reading. Switching between those three in the same week really highlighted how different storytelling styles can feel, even when you're enjoying all of them on some level. It also reminded me that it's okay to like books for very different reasons. Not everything has to be deep, slow, or demanding to be worthwhile. And next up, I'm starting Daughter of the Empire. And this is probably the book I'm most curious about going into next week. Now, this one is set in the Riftwar universe, but it's not part of the main Riftwar saga. Instead, it follows the Empire trilogy, which looks at the same larger conflict from a completely different perspective. And that alone already has me interested. The original Riftwar trilogy is very classic epic fantasy. Big events, war, heroes, villains, and a clear sense of scale. And it's very outward facing. You're watching history happen. And Daughter of the Empire, from what I understand, turns the camera inward. It's much more about politics, culture, and survival within a rigid social system, rather than battlefield heroics. And instead of asking who wins the war, it seems to ask how do you stay alive and in power when the rules are stacked against you. And that shift in focus is something I'm really in the mood for right now. And I've also heard that you don't need to have the Riftwar books fresh in your mind to enjoy this. It sounds like the book is very deliberate about teaching you how this world works, especially when it comes to its traditions, power structures, and unspoken rules. And honestly, I really enjoy fantasy that trusts its reader to follow political maneuvering and long-term planning, and characters making smart or sometimes desperate decisions. So yeah, Daughter of the Empire feels like the right book at the right time. I'm going into it excited, but also curious to see how it compares to the more traditional epic fantasy I've been reading. And I'll definitely have more to say about this one in the next weekly update. And as for channel updates, last week I did a video about the 5 standalone books I want to read this year. And I'm reading a lot of series at the moment, and I want to focus on some standalone books more. And some of my favorite books are standalone, so it's not something I want to ignore. And next week I want to do a review of Stratagem, the 4th book in the Legend of the Galactic Heroes. which was the last book I read last year. And it's been a while since I did a proper review, but it's something I really enjoy doing. And now, of course, this is a terrible book to review because very few people actually have read the series, and I'm planning on doing a full spoiler review because it's the fourth entry in the series, and I can't really say much if I keep it spoiler free. And so maybe some people will watch it in the future when they are reading the series, but I think it's a really good series, so I keep talking about it a lot. And I started reviewing all the books, so I want to keep doing that, even though there's barely an audience for it. So yeah, that was my week in reading. And like always, let me know what you've been reading this week, and I'll hope to see you again in the next update.